Hello guys, welcome to our channel. This is Baby Rule. In today's video I want to talk about the best bar build for Ranger PvE, and it is an Untamed build. It is, in my opinion, maybe the best or the most fun, at least, bar build you can play in the entire game, not just Ranger. I used to favor Holosmith and Renegade before the nerf of Battle Scars, but right now Untamed is just crazy. It is really good, and the quality of life in playing this build on every tool it has, between the cleave, the fast-paced combat, melee range, everything, it is just beautiful, defensively and offensive. So I want to clarify a few things first. Let's start with what is the status of Untamed for power play since the release of the game. I don't think it was ever weak or bad in general. The whole problem was it's always had to compete with the condition or the hybrid form. So what changed about this? First, many of the things I hated about the hammer, Ariane changed and buffed a lot of it. For example, I hated that this force skill actually was very slow. It was 1 second and it should have been faster based, and right now it got buffed. The cast time got reduced by a quarter and it grant protection, so the building more into this bunkery, bruisery style of a class, while still maintaining a very decent or high DPS in general. And both of the other skills, those two got actually also buffed by granting barrier upon the first impact and then upon additional hits, and this one also can grant barrier. So the damage, the more tankiness from barrier, protection, and the faster based a little bit in actually using the hammer made it a little bit better. Right now hammer is probably your best option comparing to everything that it gives and still dish out damage, so it is the obvious choice over greatsword. Now, is that enough to change everything? There's also some changes and buffs in the trades themselves, and the most important thing that ArenaNet said that they will be nerfing Fervent Force or reworking the entire trade. We do not know yet what will change, but when that trade change, if it's not as good as it used to be, then builds like this would make more sense. So right now when you play Fervent Force, my main Untamed or the one with the Alacrity Spirit, the solo one, the two probably best forms you can play, are very strong in resetting skills, healing. They don't sacrifice tankiness, they can run a lot of toughness and then still dish an insane amount of damage, stacking bones, and do whatever you want to do depending on how you're gonna run your build. And you mostly run that with axe for higher even hits. You can apply a lot of hits and reset the elite faster since it counts on every hit achieve an entire second, besides the trait Fervent Force itself. So if this trait got changed, Power Untamed would make even more sense, because both of the other traits do not work at all with condition. And I hope ArenaNet pay attention to that if this trait does not work, we need a way to play condition Untamed, or this entire line will be worthless. Running Celestial or stuff like that, you can heal yourself a bit, you can increase your damage. However, those traits are working for power, so like a hyper build would work, a power build would work greatly, but condition build does not have any trait. So I hope this trait is actually getting, even if it gets reworked, it can support both condition and power, or at least condition, just since we have two traits for power. So if we pretend that this trait is already reworked, if we ignore it, this build will make the most sense, and it is beautifully done. And that's also another reason why I didn't like the power Untamed in general, because you would want to use hammer because it can do a lot of CC, so this skill would reset your cooldown because of Fervent Force. This skill will reset your cooldown. If you're running the Exploding Spores, it can reset your cooldown. You can reset it through another weapon if it's a greatsword or warhorn or even longbow, and you can even run other traps or other skills for CC, and you keep doing this cycle. You don't even have a window for other skills. You play in this trait only. There is no time to even press this one or this one. You keep switching immediately by resetting skills. And this playstyle, I just hated it, and it still wasn't actually that useful, because you can run with the axe build and it will always be favored through being a stronger tank and still even better damage or bones, whatever you want to play it. So hammer had its own niche thing, and I never found it to make much sense. But like I said, so we will pretend this trait does not exist. It's not an option for us since we don't know how it will end, and that's why, or when you see how this build actually shines. I'm running skirmishing and natural magic and untamed. This is an exclusively power build in general. So let's start with those trait and how they work for us. Skirmishing will give us tailwind and ferocious grip, which mean every time we switch weapon we will grant ourselves swiftness and fury. And because of nature magic, I need you to remember that every boon we will get will be shared with our bit. Our bit will take it too. So whenever we get this fury and swiftness, our bit will take. Also, we have spotter, and it will be granting fury to everyone around us from time to time. It's almost 50% of the time we have fury just from this trait, and also that mean to our bit. But for our bit it will be longer, since it will take it from the trait itself if we're solo or something, and then copy it from us. So our bit is always having fury very easy. I mean, we can keep it 100% of the time, but our bit even more. And we want fury to be 100% of the time because we are running vicious quarry, which mean whenever we have fury we get 250 ferocity increase, and fury giving us critical chance by 40% instead of the normal 25. It's a huge increase, as you can see. A critical chance increased by 15%. The last minor trait is Hunter's Tactics, and it means if we are flanking, which means we hitting the enemy to the side or behind, a 45 degree in front of the enemy, avoid it and hit from the side or behind, and you are flanking, you get increased critical chance by 10% and critical damage by 15%. We also take in Trapper Expertise only to run Frost Trap. And we're gonna explain this when we get to the skills why. It is basically a lot of damage, a lot of CC, but we're gonna talk a little bit about more. In Nature Magic, we get regeneration if we are hit below 50%, a little bit of sustain, and this is the trait we're talking about, Fortifying Bond. When we gain any boon, our bit copies a boon for those durations that you can see here, and we have a lot of concentration or boon duration in general, so we have longer duration in general. And the last minor is increased concentration for both us and our bit. Like I said, a lot of concentration and a lot of boon duration. Now the choices for traits is Bountiful Hunter, which mean every boon we have will increase our damage by 1%, and that affects both us and the bit, so our bits actually do an insane amount of damage on this bit. And even among groups it will be very easy, since it the boon priority and everything will always trigger the player, not the bit, but since you're sharing your boons with it, the trait will ensure that your bit always get all the boons. So it always buffed no matter how many players around you. And we take in evasive priority. This is mainly because there is one thing in this build that not work as optimal as we need, which is condition cleansing. We will get that when we get to the gear. So this is the only trait we have that can give us a little bit of control over condition and survival. In PvE, you always, if you want to have fun, if you want to play the right way, you need condition cleanse. You would be having a cripple or bleed or whatever on you, and you waited to end until you can actually leave combat and ride your mount, and that's very bad. You want to cleanse whenever you want to cleanse, so you always want to have cleanse on your build. That's beside, in some areas you would have enemies that do an insane amount of condition damage that will simply kill you, so you always need condition cleanses. The other two are actually tempting because on bit swap we can have fury and vigor, but we already can gain vigor from this skill if you want. It's not stuck on that, and we already have an insane amount of fury. And the other one is support for warhorn and giving us regeneration, and we are using warhorn, so it's very tempting to use. But however, I found having any way of condition cleansing adding to the build is actually much better. And this trait given us on a 10-second internal cooldown. When we dodge, we will remove a damaging condition and non-damaging condition. So you will always make sure to remove something that you need to save your life from the damage or remove something else. So the last trait is Protective Ward, and this is a very good trait. So when you receive any damage, nearby foes, all of them on a 240 radius, will get weakened, and you will get protection. And since we have a lot of protection duration, it is about 50% of the cooldown only from this trait. So it's very easy in this build if you want to keep up protection almost permanently. It's so easy, like you can overcap the time, no problem. You can however find it tempting to go with Invigorating Bond for extra healing, but we heal very nicely on this build in general, and most of the protection sources we will not go for them unless we actually need them, so they are not very stable on rotation, so I rather go with this one and heal by myself. And that's why I am not going with Invigoration Bond, but however feel free to change depending on what you want or how you play this build for yourself, how you feel it work for you. Now the last line is the Untamed. Obviously we get the Unleash Ambush skills, and we are using Hammer and Axis. We will get that when we get to the weapon, and it is a healing source with damage source. It's very good skill to have. And On Untamed, we never really have to run any vitality in our gear since we gain already vitality from Nature Fortitude, 240 vitality, which mean 2k 400 to our health pool. Very nice to have. And this is the trait that actually responsible for the seed from the Unleash Ambush skill. The last one is Vow the Untamed, which is one of the main reasons why Untamed is the best or the most enjoyable to play in power as a class in the game right now for me, because you can lower the incoming power damage on you by 25% as long as your bit is unleashed. It's technically permanent, and you can increase your own outgoing damage by 25% if you are unleashed. So you have control when to burst, when to defend yourself, when to start kiting or surviving if the situation becomes very difficult. Now for our choices, since we only running two skills from cantrip, I did not want to take the barrier, and we already have huge defense, and I run a skill that can grant me barrier. Besides, some of the hammer skill grant me barrier, so I found it pointless, and this one is very designed to the condition style, and we do not struggle with CC anyway, so I want it for higher DPS, obviously. Blinding Outburst, this skill for Unleash Bit have an increased damage by 25%. And actually, noticeably, I done some calculation or testing, and it was higher DPS actually from other options. Now, I go with Enhancing Impact because we have a lot of boon duration, so we can choose when to get stability and when to get quickness. We can balance between both. This is a CC skill, this is a CC skill, and this one also. And we have Warhorn 5 as a CC skill. You can grant yourself stability by CCing while your bit is unleashed, or granting yourself quickness by CCing the enemy while you are unleashed. Besides, Hammer Ambush skill already grant 2 stacks of stability for 5 seconds, so there was always a lot of stability. And the elite granted us insane amount of stability, very long, and we can copy it with our healing skill. So you will always have stability, always have protection, always have reduction for damage from Vow the Untamed, from the protection itself, and from the elite if you're having it up. It is very strong build that can really be just in the face of the enemy a lot of the time. Besides, you can grant yourself some barrier, so it's very good while keeping an insane amount of damage. And the last one is also building more in our defense. So we gain protection whenever we unleash our bit or ourselves on an internal cooldown of 10 seconds, even outside of combat, as you see here. Protection the moment I do that. And when I leave, the cooldown is not really up yet, so I don't get the protection. But if the 10 second pass, I can do it in or out. So it will just be right there behind that you can gain more protection over time. And this trait is the main reason we are tanking a lot. So we don't just heal from our healing skill and the ambush skill from the seeds. We also heal by 5% from all the power damage that we do, the strike damage. So this trait used to be 10%, and it got nerfed to 5%, both with other traits that do similar things, like Parasitic Contingent for Necromancer, if anyone remember. It's a condition trait, so it takes 5% of the condition damage you deal to healing. I never liked that for any class, not just Ranger, not for Necromancer or anything. 5% felt too low. Even if it have some sustainability, you lost what really meant for you to take this trait, the level of sustain that was very stable and very reliable to keep you alive. So I wish it's more than 5%, but it is what it is. Obviously, the last one is hard damage, but we want to be able to survive, to stand in the face of the enemy, a lot of enemy, to solo things. So DPS is not your main concern. Restorative Strike is the one we are going for, obviously. If you're changing this build, you're running with other players or whatever, there will be some changes that you can do. If you're going with Strike with it, yes, you can take the hard DPS, obviously, and you can even change the gear options that we're gonna be talking about. Which take me to our gear options. So the main status or prefix that I use for my gear on this build is Diviner. I want a lot of concentration, I want boon duration. This build a lot of boons and share it with the bit, and both of you gain even extra damage on the boons. You become tanky, you heal better, you work faster, you have quickness, stability all the time. You don't even care, sometimes you don't even need to dodge, it just you push through the face of the enemy, and that's why we want a lot of boons. So I'm running Diviner, and unlike Berserker, Diviner will give you even more stats, so it feels much better. And you don't need other things like Vitality from Dragon or Marauder. Like we said, you do not need Vitality on Untamed. So I'm running Diviner. However, the whole build can work with Berserker, which I advise against it. At least keep half of your stats Diviner. You gain some a boon duration. Don't just go with normal because it's gonna be a little bit too low. But you can run half of a berserker if you wanna increase your damage a bit. It's really up to you. Now I go with Rune of the Back, also for it granting the higher level of stats, 125 precision and 175 power, while still granting us boon duration and giving us boons, and that's very crucial point of the build. See, the moment we start combat, we will get the boons on us, and we can also share the boon from Warhorn, and then we can copy both of them. So let me show you that in action. As you see, my bit got those boons, and I give them more boons, 25 stacks, and I copy it, and I have 25 stacks. Because my bit takes the boons from the rune, and the boon from the Warhorn, and then copies them again. And once I copy that, I get all of that again, and as we see, we can keep a lot of duration just as the fight started. We didn't even grant ourselves might from this skill yet, and we didn't talk about axe granting us might or anything, and we can keep copying boons again, granting ourselves boons again. It's just very simple, very good. So it works harmony with itself. You simply gain boons from the rune, and that's why I also use Warhorn, and we can stack and copy things with our healing skill. For my weapons, I use berserker weapons. I don't have diviner, and there is a limit to diviner. Obviously, if you keep getting everything diviner at some point, it will be too much, and most of the necessary boons we have a huge duration of. Like I said, you can mix match. The stats type is not mandatory on how you run it. Just try to get some boon duration. So I run berserker weapon. However, like we said, there is only one downside in this build, is how it deals with condition. There is not much of condition cleanse on it. So we ran this trait to cleanse condition on dodge, and we couldn't take that trait because we have this the stability and quickness to fill up more of our DPS and increase our effectiveness in general, and be able to stay tanky and not just panic and keep stun breaking. We wanted this much stability, so we didn't take the trait of to condition cleanse here. So I'm running on my weapon actually sigil of generosity and sigil of cleansing, both weapon, axe, warhorn and hammer. So generosity will give you, every time you critically hit the enemy on a 6-second cooldown, you will transfer a condition from you to the enemy, which make you again play into this face-to-face thing that you don't care what's happening around you. You will just give the condition again and keep moving. You don't need to heal or cleanse or anything. The moment it's become very difficult, or there's a lot of condition you need to kite, to go to range, to start using axe or something like that, you switch weapon and you can cleanse 3 extra conditions. Obviously it's tempting to go with sigil like force or whatever, any sigil that will actually increase your damage simply or give you more value, but this build needs a condition cleanse if you want to play it anywhere and in any situation. So those was my choices for the sigil. And my trinkets are also all diviner. However, I don't have accessory for diviner or berserker. I played with some other option like assassin. I played with some with vitality, and I just went with 2 celestial in the end, just kept them there, whatever it is. But obviously that's just because I don't have exactly what I wanted. So like I said, mostly diviner. You can mix with berserker. It's really up to you. The main key is to have some boon duration. Now let's talk about weapon, build choices and skills, and to explain that I'm going to need to explain how the build works first. I always say that best build is always a build that can adapt to any situation. So it has high damage, it has high sustain, it has melee option and range option. That's why we have hammer as our melee and axe warhorn as a range option. It can deal with condition, it has a stun break, all the tools that it needs to adapt to any situation or fight in any circumstances. So for this build, we have some ways to be tanky and other ways to do damage and to heal, stuff like that. So the main way that we are tanky is basically that we are run this elite that can reduce damage for 50% and even give you boon to reduce condition damage. And we have a lot of stability to be very bruisery and a lot of protection. We already explained that this skill, this one, and this one can give us protection. Besides actually switching between Unleash Orbit and Ourself can give protection. And on a 15-second cooldown, every time we get attacked, we will gain protection. Some of those protection sources, as you can see, you won't always use it. If you want more damage, if you're just bursting DPS, you will use the Unleash form, so you won't get protection, for example. And the same way for the skill, because you can gain might. However, we have enough protection sources to cover that. And the other bit for that, if we really need to tank, like we run this bit for damage, and Jacaranda can have a lot of cleave damage and multiple hits on a very low cooldown. And the other bit is for actually tanking. The bubble of the turtle will keep giving us protection, and every time we take this protection it go to her, so she stack over the cap to herself just by using this skill. And if we heal, we can give this protection again, copy it to ourselves, so we can extend it to her. That obviously presuming that we use it before it run out, or we already have protection from other source, which you will always have. So turtle, forget about the bear. This thing can become a brick wall. She will have permanent protection very easily all the fight if you use it, and she can have CC to help you while stunning the enemy and stuff like that. So she's very tanky, very strong, more than 50k health with huge armor. The other option is Jacaranda, and Jacaranda can give you some CC, soft CC through the move. She can heal herself. She's also very tanky with the same toughness but lower health, and she can do an insane amount of damage. And our sustainability comes from healing, that we can give sometime ourselves barrier, and also from this trait restorative strike can regenerate our health by 5% from all our damage. So we need to be hitting fast, hard and repetitively. We need to do as much damage in shortest time and keep repeating the same thing. We need sustained damage, not a simple burst. Huge burst or for a single target or stuff like that is not the most effective. It's not just about DPS. And even if you can scale your damage even as a burst or a single target so high that it can be enough, that's not enough to help with this one. So this skill is very strong for our build. It's a huge source of our boons, long stability that can really keep you tanky, and damage reduction for both you and your pet. And you want to keep your pet alive on Untamed. It can be very punishing to get your pet dies. And that's why we use 2 tanky bits. Not only that, aggro in the game will make the mob go to the highest toughness target, so with 2 bits that have really high toughness, much higher than yours, then the enemy normally or should always go to your bit, not you. And with higher health ball, with the ability to give them protection almost indefinitely, it's very good to keep both your bits alive, and this skill can do the same. This skill will reduce its charge time by 1 second every time you apply a hit, you or your bits that actually you applied it to. So if you use it like that, don't switch bits or it will not work for the other bit, it will not reduce the damage. 90-second cooldown is huge, and you have it for 10 seconds, so 80 seconds up. However, if you hit something slow, if you're using something like greatsword or whatever, your hits are very decisive, it takes a lot of time. That's why we want a lot of hits. So the optimal situation that you're not gonna be used all the time is you be on Jacaranda and on X Warhorn when you initiate it, so you can get the cooldown fast enough. But obviously you can't always harmonize your cooldowns, and sometimes you need it just to tank things. It's a way to survive, so not really to apply a rotation of DPS 4, so just adapt. And the hammer can also be good enough, and that's why, like I said, we run this trap. So those 2 skills can apply multiple hits to multiple targets. Both of them will hit everyone in the vicinity or in the radius of them, basically. This one will hit 5 targets up to 5 times, which mean 25 hits, which mean 25 seconds shaved from that. So you're hitting multiple enemies with high damage, will help reset the skill faster, and also will grant you all that healing from restorative strike from both skills. The same way with the unleash skill for or the ambush skill for Axe, the same way, so many hits to help reset this faster from Warhorn 4, even Axe 2, and also the 5 hits from the ambush here, 3 hits here, 2 hits here. There's a lot of things that you can do. And your bit also can do 5 hits to every enemy in the entire area. So it's a key thing to be able not only to do high damage, but many hits to many enemies, cleaving like mad. And what can happen that also, like this skill 5, it applies 5 hits around your bit to 5 targets in the area. So a skill like this also help reset a lot, and all of its skill, the unleash skill, are actually multiple targets. Now there is few also really interesting combo, like the trap itself. You can use a blast finisher in it, like this skill or this one, or even the warhorn, to give yourself a chilling aura to apply chill to the enemy to hit you. It will help with breaking defiance bar, and also reduce the damage by 10%. keep up that with the protection. You can also with the 50% from forest fortification, you are very tanky on this build. Now, like I said, I use hammer for this, multiple hits, many ways of CC, it just loaded with things now, protection, barrier, so it's the obvious choice for a weapon. And we use axe warhorn. I recommend to not go with axe because basically that turn your range setup to another melee setup. The biggest hitting thing will be the axe of hand 5. So even if you can keep the CC from skill 4 on the axe 4 hand, this skill is still a melee skill. It is very good in damage, like very bursty, but you're just again in melee, so you will not be able to adapt to range this far. If you move to range, you will not have this much damage. So you can, but I do not recommend it because of that. Besides, there is something very important about Warhorn, as we explained. With the Rune of the Back, you can gain boons every 30 seconds to you and your allies, which mean one of your allies is your bit if you're alone, or if it still have priority simply. So your bit will get the boons from around you, triggering the rune, and then will copy it again from you. The same way I can show you right now will happen with the warhorn. So it's 6 stacks of might, but my bit get 12. With the rune, my bit would get like 24, and then we copy it. We both have 25 might for a very long duration. And this is something you can keep juggling easily in fights, keeping up a huge amount of boons to yourself and your bit. You cannot do that if you run an axe offhand. And also it's a swiftness source that you don't need to ride a mount for or be in combat, unlike Tailwind, the trait that you can switch weapon inside combat. So this is basically enough. You can have enough swiftness from it, or other than that you can be on mount, but it just felt a little bit better to have in general. And like I said, boons from the get-go up to 25 might without needing to do anything else, or stay on axe a lot, or even use the skill to gain might. You can use axe, but that's why I'm using warhorn. I need a range weapon, a complete range setup, and if I'm in melee I can simply be on hammer. The last skill is my sunbreak, and it is protect me, but it's not the only choice you can go for. So there's few changes you can go about that. So you can go with mutate condition to have a very good way to survive conditions with almost the same cooldown. And because of that, you can change to natural shield, so you will gain more barrier. So skills like this will give you barrier, even the elite will give you barrier. It will fill the gap that protect me would offer you to survive immediately any problem, but you will lose the protection, which means in most fights you will have to switch between bits at least to grant yourself more condition duration protection duration from the turtle, or sometimes use other sources like skill 4 on hammer, or gain some protection from exploding spores. It is really up to you. And in this form you will lose a little bit of DPS because moving to turtle is something you don't want to use most of the time, so because Jacaranda is much more powerful. Even the basic power stats, as you see, is more powerful. Besides, you will also sacrifice the high damage of blinding outburst to gain some barrier, but it's completely up to you. On the bright side, if you do this modification, you can change at least one of the sigil, I would say sigil of cleansing, to another option for damage like sigil of force or something like that. So this part is very optional. It is really up to you. I wouldn't change sigil of generosity because it just roll up there when you stand in the face of the enemy, keep healing, keep gaining bones, you always have stability, so keep it, it will help you, but maybe you can change sigil of cleansing. And then the only condition cleanser you will be able to control will be evasive purity. So let's just say those are two forms of the build. Basically you can run with the barrier and change the sigil, or you can run with protect me and go with blinding outburst. It's really up to you. So that's it for the video, and I'll be seeing you next time. Peace.